Hi everyone. We're delighted to be hosting this Civic Punks discussion tonight. Thank you all so much for coming. I'm really excited to hear about Derek's insights from the world tour, and I'm sure a lot of you are too. Just going to do a little bit of housekeeping, but also just to say for anyone who hasn't been here before for a Transform Gov or Digital Forum event, we are TPX Impact. We're a B Corp digital transformation agency working with lots of clients across government to try and make services better for people, places and planet. So yeah, also really curious in the theme of future government. The restrooms, the toilets, they're through that door and on your right. I think both doors should be open, so you should be able to get in and out of those easily. There is no fire drill tonight, so if you hear it, it's real, and we need to exit through this door and go downstairs. Orlando somewhere is our first aider, and yeah, don't forget to tag us or share about this event if you do. Something that a colleague of mine just really wanted to share, it's our own punk project that we've been working on, and we've been collating the insights from our work across government teams that are trying to deliver local services, and the broken technology markets that usually are prevalent in organisations who deliver services locally. And so through in housing, in planning, in social care, we've been supporting government teams to tackle that and actually start to improve how services are delivered at scale between organisations. And that takes kind of quite brave change from policymakers that want to step up and make the systemic difference. So yeah, that's going to be dropping, I believe, in a couple of months. But yeah, you can sign up with the QR code, and there you can register your interest so that you get that when it's published. I'm not going to take up any more of your time. Hello, Derek. Welcome.
Wow. So I guess it's being awkward just like standing in front of my own picture here. But,
do you want to go to the first one?
yes.
Let's go back.
Am I going the right way?
Yeah, there.
Yeah, there we go. That feels a little less awkward. Hi, everyone. So for those of you who don't know me, my name's Derek Alton. For those of you who do know me, you know that I am obsessed with the future of government and how do we make government better? How do we fix government? I mean, well, why am I obsessed with this? Well, because the quality of society that we have is tied to the quality of government we have. If we want a better society, we need to have a better government. Also, no matter what issue you care about, whether it's climate change, inequality, poverty, food scarcity, biodiversity, government is the most powerful lever we have to tackle those issues. The problem, of course, is government is broken in all of these different ways that we know about. So let's figure out how to fix government. Makes sense? So that's been my obsession for the last 17 years. It's taken me on a trajectory from working in academia, studying public sector innovation, to working in the government of Canada in digital transformation. Not because I have any background in digital, I don't. My background is in social change. I'm a social scientist by training. But that's where the action was. Like when you looked at where government was moving and changing the most, it was the intersection of government and technology. So that's where I went. Got to meet with amazing people. And I think that's really what opened me up to this concept of civic punks. Civic punks are what I call the people who are working for change in the system. They're people who combine this passion for their community, for their country, for their state, whatever it is, with this rebelliousness against the status quo, this feeling that what isn't good enough. We need to be better, we can be better. And the final piece for me with civic punks is they're the people who are doing stuff. They're not just complaining, they're actively trying to create this better future. Civic punks. And I've been obsessed with them ever since. I basically just kind of hang out with them and try to convince them, like I'm like a groupie, a Civic Punks groupie is how I describe myself. Traveling the world, like, come on, hang out with me, I swear I'm cool. And that's really been my journey. And so that journey took me here to London. And I lived in London for 4-ish years at a place called Apolitical. There's some current and former Apolitical people here. For those of you who don't know about Apolitical, it is a global ed tech company that specializes in training public servants, really helping make government smarter and more effective. And I joined Apolitical 4 years ago now, to help build communities of practice. Because one of the things I love doing is connecting people and ideas. And one of the big challenges in government is, you probably know, is it's very siloed. And so if you can find ways to connect people across these silos, you can help create real change. And that's really been the journey of mine for the last while. But about 8 months ago, I quit a job that I really loved at Apolitical, left a country that I really enjoyed here in the UK, went back to Canada to go on a giant adventure that I've now called Civic Punks. The goal was simple: travel the world to figure out what the future of government is through the eyes of the people who are making it happen, and then share their stories in videos and podcasts, new forms of media. Why now? Well, we're going through this period of huge change. I mean, you're living it. I don't have to tell you this. The world's changing dramatically. And we are struggling to figure out how to make government keep up with this change. Like, the classic quote is that government's a 19th century idea using 20th century tools to solve 21st century problems. Obviously, it doesn't work. So the question then is, well, what is 21st century government? I didn't know, so I went on an adventure. I'm still on that adventure to figure it out. The idea was, again, to travel the world. And the purpose of the videos and podcasts was the realization that where we are increasingly going to create change, to learn about things, is through mediums like YouTube, mediums like Instagram. This is where we're going to make sense of the world around us. And there are people creating content around all sorts of different things. If you're interested in how to properly mow the lawn, there's a YouTube channel for you. If you're interested in how to repair vintage teddy bears, there's a YouTube channel for you. There's a YouTube channel on everything. If you're into bridges, there are lots of YouTube channels just on bridge engineering. But if you are interested in the future of government, if you are interested in how do we change this thing that is the foundation of our society, there is no video content about that. There are no content creators out there yet. Hopefully, by the time tonight's over, you're like, my gosh, I'm going to quit my job as well, and I'm going to become a content creator on government. That is my hope. That's my aspiration. So we'll see how we do. That's why I want to do videos and podcasts. It's more relational. There is actually a lot of conversations that are happening about the future of government in text format, right? We've got lots of really interesting organizations, civil service world, great publications, lots of interesting conversations there about the future of government. There are people blogging and writing all sorts of interesting things, but we're not yet in the medium of video and podcast in a meaningful way yet. It's starting to happen. I've got a list of podcasters. I think so far I've found 40 different podcasts around the world. They're doing podcasts about government, but no one's doing video stuff yet, at least not well, I would argue. Because video is more relational. You build this parasocial relationship and you learn together. You go on a journey together. So anyways, that's the idea of Civic Punks. Let's figure this out together. Let's travel the world and try to figure out how do we do good video and podcast content around this question of the future of government. Because the future of government is being built right now by people all over the place. What are they building? So that's the plan. So what I'm doing this year is I've basically split it into 4 legs. So leg 1 was in March, and I went to Asia and the Pacific. Leg 2 is right now. And despite your best efforts, this is Europe. So I am here for the Europe leg. This is the beginning of the Europe leg. And then September is Africa. And then November is going to be in South America. So that is basically the world, because I'm kind of skipping over the United States because we don't need to worry about them. And I will be hopefully connect with Mexico on my way down to, it's more of a Latin America trip as opposed to South America. And then I'm based in Canada. So when I'm not on the road, I'm creating content about Canada. Anyways, I'm not competitive with the United States. It's fine. Okay. So my goal really tonight is just to tell some stories. Tell some stories about the people and the ideas I've come across through leg 1. Okay. So I gave myself some notes here, mainly just for names, to be honest. The first place I went to is Singapore. So why go to Singapore? Singapore is considered by many to be one of the most effective and well-run governments in the world. The public service there works and works incredibly well. And one of the interesting things you realize when you go to Singapore is, for most people in much of the world, including here in the UK, government is synonymous with friction, When we think about government, we think of bureaucracy. We think of gears getting stuck and gummed and things just not moving forward. In Singapore, government is synonymous with the idea of frictionless. It's frictionless government. You don't notice it. Things just happen around you. Things just work. You don't have to even think about it. Like going into the airport. I mean, coming out of the Singapore airport itself was just an experience. There's no airport in the world like it. If you've ever been to the Singapore airport, it is this weird mix of like digital and real life, where like you have this like pond in front of you, which is a real pond with fish and stuff like that. And then around the pond is like a sky that's a fake sky, but it looks like a real sky. And then there's a waterfall that's a fake waterfall, but it looks like a real waterfall. But then there's a tank that's a real tank. And so you feel like you're surrounded by nature, but it's half tech and half real. And that's Singapore. It's this digital, physical, real mesh of things. And you just walk through the airport. I remember I got in and also out of the airport. I'm like, I don't even remember going through customs. It was frictionless. You just kind of walk through. I mean, there's a whole surveillance piece to that as well, which is another point of conversation. But it is frictionless. And that's just such a different model. And the legitimacy of government in many places like the UK is through elections. The government is seen as legitimate because we voted these people in. In Singapore, they do actually have elections, but the legitimacy of the government isn't from elections. The legitimacy is that things just work. And that's why the government's legitimate. When I was there, I met with a woman named Liana Tang. So Liana is really involved in the foresight space in Singapore. Singapore has the best foresight division for government in the world. I mean, the Middle East has got some, like the UAE's got a pretty strong one as well, but generally speaking, Singapore is seen as having the strongest, most robust foresight division in the world. It's really good. And Liana is part of that community. But that's actually not what we talked about. What we talked about was her master's research. She took me to this restaurant. I ate chicken rice, which is the standard meal apparently there. You just eat tons of chicken rice. And we talked about her master's research, which she did here, actually, which is on this question of friction. So Singapore is frictionless, which generally speaking sounds good. But Liana's point was sometimes you want friction. Sometimes friction is something that's a good thing. And her question is like, when do we want to have friction? Like, being intentional about where in our lives is friction important? And friction is usually important when it's associated with something that is important to us, that's significant to us. So the example of her research was actually around housing. So in Singapore, they have a very robust housing system. It's more socialist housing system. Actually, it's if you want a fun conversation with someone in Singapore, ask them if they live in a socialist country, and they usually get really upset. Be like, we're not socialist, we're a capitalist meritocratic system. But if you actually break it down, they are more socialist than like the Scandinavian countries. And one of the examples of this is housing. So if you get married, because they're really trying to encourage people to get married, you get access to all of these you get subsidized housing. Amazing. And what Liana discovered is that once you do that, it's like this seamless process, and all of a sudden you have a house, right? It doesn't have friction to it. And what she found was that people didn't want that. They wanted, it's a house. This is your first ever house. It should be significant. It should be something that should have some friction to it. And her question is like, great, where else in our lives do we want to have friction? Which for me was just like complete reversal of how you think about things, because usually the issue is government has too much friction. Here you have an issue of government has too little friction. So when we talk about the future of government, I think it's this middle ground of being like, where do we want friction in our life? Where do we want to see and experience government in our life? And where do we want government to be hidden? And to be intentional about what that is. So Singapore, incredibly organized, incredibly clean. There's like no graffiti, unless it's state-sanctioned graffiti, in which it has a section, and it's beautiful. From there, I went to Malaysia. And the reason I went to Malaysia is a friend of mine's like, you got to go to Malaysia. They're doing really interesting stuff around AI. And they are. But that's not what I want to talk to you about. What I want to talk to you about is art. So when I went to Malaysia, I went to a place called Aswara. So Aswara is the Malaysia National Academy of Arts, Culture, and Heritage. And I heard that they were doing some really interesting stuff about gamification. Using gamification, just glow when I talk about gamification. They're using gamification to help tackle policy issues. I love games. I'm like, this would be really cool. But what really stood out for me from that experience wasn't actually games per se. It wasn't going forward. It was almost like looking back. Because when you travel, you get to have like weird experiences you don't expect. And so in this case, I had a chance, they gave me a private performance of historical Malaysian shadow puppetry from a guy named Wayang Kulit, who is this globally renowned shadow puppeteer. He trains the experts. And so I got like this like person, just like me, sitting there with it was wild. And it was really good. I had no idea. It was all in a language I did not understand. But you could still follow the story because he's just a fantastic storyteller. And then afterwards, I got to talk to him about it. And one of the things that he talked about was how historically shadow puppetry was used as a bridge between worlds. It was a way for the royal family to communicate with the masses and for the masses to communicate with the royal family. It was the common experience that everybody had. And this idea of art as a bridge between worlds that otherwise don't connect with each other. And it's kind of interesting, right? Because like nowadays, our worlds are so siloed. I mean, the digital world puts us in our own little bubbles where we only see certain things. Where could art be a bridge between these worlds? And in particular, I mean, a great example is government. Government is this weird bubble that for the vast majority of people feels like something over there that we don't understand, that we can't connect with, it's walled off. Could art be a bridge that helps connect governments to the masses and the masses to governments, and for a conversation to happen through that art? And what does that look like when we talk about policy making, when we talk about program development? How do we use art and storytelling to connect and share with each other across these divides? Even though they are doing some really cool stuff around AI, that's the story that stuck out for me. That's the thing that I'm walking away with. And, when we talk about the future of government, how does art serve as a vehicle to bridge barriers and walls that our world is full of? From Malaysia, I continued south and went to a place called Australia. You might have heard of it. Turns out it's a very big island, and I danced around a whole bunch of it. And there are tons of different stories, because I went from Darwin in the north to Adelaide in the south to Melbourne and Sydney and Canberra. But I want to start with Darwin. In Darwin, I got a chance to hang out with one of my all-time heroes. I am a huge nerdy geek when it comes to these things. And yes, I do have a Mount Rushmore of heroes when it comes to nerdy government stuff. And at the center of that wall, of that mountain of heroes, is a woman named Pia Andrews. Pia, for me, defines what it means to be a civic punk. She's from Australia, and she's worked in the digital government space there for decades. I first got a chance to meet her 10 years ago in Canada when we brought her there to be a keynote speaker at a conference we organized on digital government. And she just blew my socks off, and I've been a fan of hers ever since. So the chance to, like, because when I went to Australia, they're like, Darwin, why on earth would you go to Darwin? It's like someone coming here and being like, I went to Axminster. It's like, okay, sure did. Why? And I did actually go to Axminster a couple days ago, but I'll get to that. That's actually later in this. But you get the point, right? It's Darwin is that place. It's the headwaters into the outback. It is like proper wild Australia. Why would I go there? Well, because Pia's there. Pia just moved to Darwin. I'm like, of course, a chance to hang out with Pia for a weekend. Absolutely, I will do that. And we had a lot of fun. I got to meet her daughter, who is just like a mini version of her, which is hilarious. And we played games because they're a really competitive family. And then we went, and she took me to Crocodile Zoo. I don't know what else to call it, a zoo for crocodiles. But intermixed with these experiences with these animals was all these conversations about the future of government, because Pia is on the front lines of building the future of government. And there's so many different stories I could tell from it. But the one I thought was particularly interesting is a concept she calls chair time. So one of the big challenges with changing government is leadership. You need to have good leadership to create change. There's so many good examples of that being the case. But the problem is a lot of leadership ends up being centralized and controlled. Pia tries to counteract that. And one of the ways she does this is through a process she calls chair time. So Pia has been a senior leader in government for at least the last 15 years. And the idea is, to explain chair time, is when you, as a leader, go away on holidays, because you can't be working all the time, you have someone act for you, right? They step in and they pretend to be you and have the same authorities as you do for that 2-week, 3-week, month-long period, whatever it is, right? And that's not unique to government. It's true in most organizations, right? It's how we keep things moving and yet still allow people to take holidays and stuff like that. Pia's point was, great, why don't we do that all the time? And so what she would do is that every single day for 2 hours, she would have a member of her executive team act for her. And it'd be a different person. And she called it chair time. And so during those 2 hours, they were her. They had the same authority. They didn't have full financial signing authority, but if they did anything during that time, she would just sign it. She wouldn't question it. And she said it was really good because for her, it was fantastic because it gave her time to think. When you're a senior leader, you're expected to think deeply about stuff, and you never have time to do it. This also gave her 2 hours every day when she could just turn off the putting out fires part of her brain and focus on the strategic direction of the organization. On the flip side, it helped build up the capacity of the people underneath her because they were then raised to a higher position where they had to have a broader view of what's going on. It wasn't just their project anymore. They were now, for those 2 hours every week, responsible for the whole entire organization's department's project. And it forced them to have more awareness, which then fed back to their deeper understanding of how their piece was positioned in the larger whole. So it built up the capacity. Because one of the big challenges we have in government is every once in a while we get a really good leader and they drive change within the system. And then they move on. And whatever change was there collapses, doesn't move forward. And a lot of that comes down to this lack of focus on building the capacity within a team as a whole. So the thing I love about what Pia is doing with chair time is she's actively building the capacity within her organization. Because if she just then moves on to another thing, her whole entire executive have each had time doing her role. And the capacity is spread beyond her to the whole entire team. And so for me, that is an example of the future of leadership we need to see, not just in government, but in organizations everywhere, like building up and decentralizing that power. New Zealand. Oh, I have a prop for this. Thanks to Chris. Where did it go? Where's my backpack? All right. So when I was in Australia, I popped over to New Zealand because it is close-ish by. And I had a lot of friends who would not talk to me if I didn't visit them. So I went to New Zealand and went to Wellington, and there I got to hang out with a person I've admired for many years called Ambiguity. Well, that's not actually her real name. Her real name is Janine McGrudy, but her pen name is Ambiguity. And what I love about Amber is that she is a civic punk in every sense of the word. It's like hanging out with her. She's like so rebellious, and it's great. She's like in her 60s now, but she's got bright orange hair. She's got so much spunk to her. She's been working in government her whole entire life. And eventually she got frustrated by all the restrictions around it that kept her in place, as many of us run into. And she was looking for an outlet. And so she turned to fiction. She started writing. And as far as I'm aware, she's the first author of this genre called government fiction. This is her book. It's called Dear Minister, Letters from a Public Servant. And basically what she did is what we've all dreamed of doing at one point or another. She just started writing letters to her minister. I mean, how many times have you been there like, I wish I could just write a letter to my minister, because if they only knew, if they did just literally this one thing, it would make all of our lives easier. It would help them, it would help me. They just knew if I could just write them a letter, that'd be great. But you shouldn't do that because you're then going around hierarchy and then you'll get in trouble. Some of us do it anyways, and then we have battle scars because of that. So instead of that, she wrote a fiction book. And what she tapped into is the power of fiction to help us imagine something different. One of the challenges, and there's a guy named Jeff Mulligan here who's based here in the UK, brilliant thinker, brilliant writer. One of his points is that we lack imagination about what the future could look like. And it's that failure of imagination that stops us from creating something new, because we just don't know what to create. And so Amber really put me onto this whole idea of using fiction as a way to think differently, to open our minds up to a different way, a different future. She was also just a ton of fun to hang out with. We went to a festival and there was fire throw. Anyways, there's a lot of fun. The picture's somewhere. There probably shouldn't be, but there is. Okay. After New Zealand, I continued and I went to Japan. And Japan was unlike any of the places I'd been to before. The culture is much more traditional. It's much more structured. Somewhat like Singapore, but Singapore had this new trendy experience to it, whereas Japan, you felt the history, you experienced the history. In that, though, I met this guy named Haruki Yasui. And Haruki Yasui was incredibly fascinating because, every once in a while you meet someone who's just got like this deep passion, they've got a vision, and they spend their whole entire lives trying to make that vision a reality. Hideki is an example of that. And I remember I went into the office and he's like, Derek, and he just like pulled up this giant piece of paper and like put it on the table in front of me. I'm like, okay, what is this? He's like, this is a map. This is a map of all of the services the government provides in Japan across all levels, organized around life events. So the idea of organizing around life events is been an idea that's been kind of floating in the ether for a while. Pia Andrews talks about it all the time. It's one of her big things. The idea is that generally speaking, we interact with government around key life events: birth, going to school, getting a job, losing a job, retirement, death. There's about 6 or 7 or 8 key life events that we, for the most part, having kids, most of us go through. And these are the points when most of us interact with government. And knowing that, government can do so much more to wrap around us. Instead of us, like one of the issues with government right now is that you have to do all the work to navigate the complexity of government. That's on you to do the paperwork, go to this department, fill out that form, and then go to this department, fill out that form. There's this idea that's been growing in the space in terms of the future of government, this idea of wraparound services around life events, around anticipatory government. Instead of you doing all the work, government. How do you get there? This map is how you get there. For it to work, government actually needs to know what services it provides to you. And the funny thing is the government doesn't often know that because it is siloed as much as it is as lost as you are. And so by creating this map of all of the services, so step 1 is you create a map of all the services. Step 2 is you then build in the logic model. The term that's thrown around a lot is rules as code, but the logic model for each of the policies or programs, right? That way, once it's all in one place, it becomes machine readable. And that means you can build an app, you can build a program that navigates it all for you. And this is where we're going. But again, the map is the foundation. There's all this talk of AI and digital and blah, 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 being hugely helpful in terms of helping us navigate this stuff. But the simple reality is if we don't get the back end piece in order, that's not gonna matter. There was a talk I went to in Australia where this guy was talking about how, at a conference, how if we do not organize the data behind the programs and the services, instead we just throw it into AI, we are gonna get unpredictable results at the other side. And we're not gonna know when they're right, when they're wrong, and we're not gonna know how they came about. That's really dangerous. So you need to organize the back end. How do you do that? This map is how you do it. So every country everywhere should have a map like this. We should have a map that has all of our programs and services across all levels of government organized in one place around life events, and then having the logic for each of these programs and services. So that's Haruki. Actually, Haruki has a bigger vision even than that, because what he actually wants to do is he wants to create a global map, because every government is organized around the same life events. It doesn't matter whether you are here in the UK or in Japan or in Brazil or wherever. You are being born, you are hopefully getting a job, hopefully having some schooling, hopefully having a family for many people, retiring, death. These are things that are not unique to any country. And therefore, most governments in some way or another are trying to address these things. So if you can create a map and you can actually put numbers around it, and you create this as a universal map, you could do that across the whole entire world. Well, why? Why would that matter on a global scale? From Hideki's perspective, there's a couple of things that allows. One, it makes it easier for people to move countries, right? I don't know if any of you guys have had the experience of moving countries and then trying to organize your services from one country to the next. Yep. If you have, you definitely know it's a huge pain. This would solve that because it just transfers seamlessly because it's linked together. So this would hopefully make it easier for people to move and seamlessly across countries in the world. The other piece, though, that's really interesting is it also makes it a lot easier for governments to learn from each other because there's a common language, there's a common infrastructure they can talk to and speak to. And when you map out, what Japan's doing and you put it next to what Finland's doing, you can start to be like, oh, this makes it easier to compare and contrast and to learn and share best practices. Really, really cool idea. Okay, that was leg 1. but I'd be remiss if I didn't talk a little bit about Leg 2, particularly because it started with a bit of a bang. So I went to Ukraine. You might have heard of it. It's going through a bit of an interesting time right now. And I remember telling my parents this, and they're like, why? Why are you going to Ukraine, Derek? I'm like, because Ukraine is the most interesting country right now when it comes to the future of government. What they have done within the country of Ukraine over the last 5 years is nothing short of a miracle. One of the ways to quantify it is like the UN government rankings. They were 102nd. In the last 5 years, they've gone from 102nd to 5th. Over the same time period, Canada's gone from, I think, 7th to 47th. So wrong direction. But that gives you an idea of what Ukraine's doing. It's incredible. So yes, I went to Ukraine. I was definitely naive in my thinking about going to a war country. I was not ready for it in any way. I was only there for 48 hours. It was probably some of the most powerful, impactful transformation of 48 hours in my life. I feared for my life many times. I almost got hit by a drone. Do not recommend it. But within that context, they're doing this amazing stuff. And it was this really weird thing. I attempted to vlog for the first time in my life on Instagram. So it's like, I felt like the old person trying to figure out how to use Instagram. And it was this really weird thing because there's like videos of like dodging missiles combined with then followed by videos about digital government and AI in Ukraine. And they were kind of just like mixed together. One of the really interesting conversations was with Victoria, who's the CIO for the city of Kyiv. So she's in charge and she's responsible for the digital infrastructure for the city of Kyiv. Most of the conversation about Ukraine is talking about the national level, and for good reason. They're doing amazing stuff at the national level. But the city of Kyiv is actually doing some really interesting stuff as well. And she shared the story about her the first six weeks of the invasion, because she was CIO when Russia invaded Ukraine, and Kyiv was at the center of that first invasion. Like Kyiv got bombed that first day. And she said that, they knew something was coming because there had been a cyber attack the day leading up to it. So they knew something was coming, but they didn't know exactly what. And then she remembers being woken up in the middle of the night by the bombs, and having experienced it, you can't sleep through it. It is very loud, it shakes the house. She got dressed, and then instead of going to the office, she went to the data center. I remember being like, well, why the data center? Why not the office? She's like, well, if I went to the office, it'd just be a bunch of people talking. Like the data center is like where I felt like I could actually do something of impact. So her and her team met at the data center, and then they just didn't go home for 6 weeks. They stayed there for 6 weeks. They slept there, they ate there, they did everything at the data center for the next 6 weeks. And the interesting thing about the city of Kyiv's story is, like so often the story around Ukraine is that, the war has allowed them to accelerate and do amazing things with digital transformation, which is true, but it kind of misses a key point, which is that, and this is something that she emphasized multiple times in our conversation, Kyiv was able to do amazing stuff because before the war happened, they had already built an effective and a robust and trusted, she emphasized trusted as well, a trusted app that was being used by over 1 million people in the city of Kyiv. And it was this app that was, at that point, mainly used for transit and parking. But it was there, and they just repurposed it. So the very first thing they did was like, okay, what do people need right now? Well, we're being bombed. So we need a rapid response system for people to know when to take shelter. The air siren system they had in place was from the Soviet era. It was not fit for purpose at the time. So in the first 24 to 48 hours, they built an app designed to basically give warning systems for people to know what's coming. Because they already had the sensors in place. They already had a lot of sensors, they already had a lot of cameras in place to help get the information in. And then they had a direct pipeline into the military that was set up almost immediately. And so that helped them develop this system that is used to this day. Like I used it when I was there. And it went off multiple times when I was there and was a bit of a new experience. They built that within the first 48 hours on an app that already existed, on a platform that already existed. And they were able to do it that fast because it existed and people knew about it. The next thing is like, okay, great. Air sirens, fantastic. What's the next thing people need to know? They need to know where to go. Where are the shelters within Kyiv? Where's my closest shelter? And so they built an app into the same program as well. And that basically helped people find the closest shelter to them. Hugely important. At this point, it was about 5 or 6 days into it, and they realized, wait a second, we've been spending the last 5 days at the data center, which is located on the second floor of just a government building. We're probably a target. We should probably figure out how to move this thing. Usually moving a data center, bit of a big deal. It's a lot of expensive, sensitive equipment. You don't just move it haphazardly, unless you're in a state of war, in which case, in the middle of the night, you find a bunch of pickup trucks and cars from friends, and you pack up pieces of it, throw it into the car, find the closest space that makes sense, which ended up being a basement garage underneath the mall, and you set it up there. And so that's what they did. In the course of 2-3 hours, in the middle of the night, they moved not the whole data center, the most important parts of the data center to this new location. And that's where they stayed. And they set up the air mattresses, they slept in cars, and they were there for another 5 weeks. So the key thing, I mean, other than that being like a wild, I was talking to someone about this a couple days ago, and they're like, Derek, that should be a movie. Like, you could turn that into an action thriller, and it would be a really good action thriller. But the key thing to take away from that is that they were able to do it because they had the infrastructure in place. They had a digital identity system, which we are struggling with here in the UK. Canada's the same thing. They had an app that people were already using regularly for things in their life, so they were comfortable with it. That infrastructure allowed them to move in a way at the speed that they needed to. So that was Kyiv in a nutshell. Okay, so from there I arrived here. A bit of change of pace, but honestly it was really nice coming back and being able to like touch ground and be like, okay, I'm okay. I can delete the app from my phone. Although it's sobering to think about, and I've actually kept on my phone as a reminder that I'm here, but there's still millions of people there who it's gone off today several times. They've had to take shelter today because of bombings and drones. That said, okay, UK. So I mentioned I went to Axminster. Why go to Axminster? Well, same reason that you go to any place, a person. So in the case of Axminster, I went to hang out with a person named Catherine Day. Now I think a few of you here probably know Catherine Day. She's a force of nature. I've described her as probably one of the most interesting public servants I've met. I knew that she was a fighter pilot, previously flew helicopters, military helicopters. I did not know that she placed a standing base with double base, the super big one. Just a really interesting character, and she and her family moved up to Axminster a couple of years ago just to get away from the hustle and bustle, and because it's honestly, it's beautiful out there. But she's also doing something really interesting that I'm fascinated about. And I knew bits and pieces about it. It's called the National Strategy Project. And the National Strategy Project, at first, like my first take on it was, oh, it's like a national dialogue about the future of the UK. Because the UK is, I think it's fair to say, feeling a bit lost right now as a country. Where's the UK going? There's, I think, a lot of uncertainty around it, a lot of frustration around it. But it's not just a feeling of not knowing where you're going as a country. I think it's a feeling of not having agency either. And so Catherine's like, we need to fix this. We need to change this. The goal of the National Strategy Project is to create a space for the country to come together and figure out where it wants to go and how to get there. But when I talked with her about it, she said it's so much more than a national dialogue. The purpose of the National Strategy Project is to explore what it means to govern in the 21st century. Because it's not just as simple as creating a vision and then expecting the old system to implement that vision. That's not going to work. We all know that. It's about understanding what does it look like to come together as a multicultural, complex milieu of a country that is the UK, I guess country of countries that is the UK, and act together. Like, how do you build the agency of the people through this process? And so she talked about sort of having 4 key pillars within the National Strategy Project, but they're still figuring out, like they're on the ground floor figuring this out. And you all live in the UK, or I think most people here live in the UK, you can be a part of this. And I encourage you to actually consider like putting your hand up and volunteering and help make this happen, because it's going to take a lot of people to make this happen. It's a very ambitious vision that Catherine has. But she talks about 4 pillars. Pillar number 1 is, let's see if I can get this right. Pillar number 1 is information. She's like, to build any type of society, you need to have a foundation of information that you can work from. You need to understand like what is in front of you. What do you have to work with? What are the restrictions you have. So you need to have the right information, trusted information, reliable information that you can then collectively work from. And this is particularly important right now because the information ecosystem is incredibly fractured. There's a very low level of trust in this space. So that's actually a really big challenge to figure out how do you build this body of knowledge? How do you maintain it? How do you keep it going? How do you make sure people trust it and have access to it? But the UK has a lot going for it. You have an incredible network of universities and colleges here, but you also have the public service. And within the public service, there is a ton of information that the public servants are actively going out, researching and finding. That's really good and is not being accessed by the vast majority of people because that has just not been how the government has worked. So Catherine's question is, well, what would it look like if we found a way to take the vast wells of information that the public service is actively creating on a daily basis and put it out into a place where everybody could access it? But her point is you have to balance that. You can't just have the academics and the experts in the public service putting out information. There's also lived experience, the lived experience of the people on the ground in communities. What does that look like? How do we access that? How do we legitimize that? How do we create space for that? So that's pillar number one, figuring that out. Easy, it should take a week or two, no problem. Pillar number two is about dialogue. Okay, so now that you've got this information, how do you as a country come together and talk, connect? And Catherine's really excited about something actually I'm really excited about as well, this concept of deliberative dialogue. Deliberative dialogue is this idea of bringing people together to talk to each other, and through that sharing and learning from each other and finding common pathways forward. It's something that is common in many Indigenous communities. I mean, I come from Canada, and a lot of the Indigenous communities in Canada have deliberative dialogue built into the very ethos of how they function. But it's true in many countries, many places in the world. Some of these more historical cultures and societies that are more communal, have deliberative dialogue built into how they do things. So it's about building those processes and finding ways to bring them into the UK and make that part of the norm of how the UK functions, is that you have deliberative dialogue here. 3 is strategy. Okay, great. You've got the information, you've had the discussions, but now you have to think strategically about how you move forward. How do we do this? How do we make this happen? And then the final one is action. How do we act? And the big thing is, how do we set it up so everybody acts? Like one of the big questions is, how do we turn the future of the UK into something that we are all involved in on a daily basis, with the actions and the choices we make? And we feel empowered, and we see how the choices and the actions we make on a daily basis are building this future UK that we want. So it's super compelling. It's a super compelling vision. And I wish Catherine the best in terms of being able to implement that. And for me, that is an example of the type of things that Civic Punks is all about. It's about finding people who are Civic Punks like Catherine, who have visions that are compelling about what the future of government could look like, and then are trying to make it happen. And this is just the beginning. So from here, I'm going to Berlin tomorrow. And then from Berlin, I'm going to Tallinn, Estonia, which is the most talked about government in the world when it comes to digital. So I'm kind of curious to see what everybody's talking about. And then from there, Finland, and then Finland to Tbilisi, Georgia, which is where the UN Public Service Forum is happening this year. So the UN Public Service Forum is a really good place to explore what emerging economies are thinking about when it comes to the future of government. They're voices that usually are kind of overshadowed by your Singapores, by your Estonias, by your UKs and USs and stuff like that. But a lot of really interesting ideas are coming out of emerging economies as opposed to sort of older economies. And then from there, Africa in September, and then South America in November. So yeah, so that's the adventure. That's as far as I got. Sorry. Well, you know what? I'll skip that part because I really want to hear from you. So I want to open up to you guys to ask questions, and I also will have some questions for you, but I figure I'll start with you guys. This is just a skimming of all these different countries. Every single country I've gone to, I could spend hours talking about. There's so many stories. I just try to pull one that I thought was interesting from each country. There's so much that's happening in the world. But yeah. What questions people have? Yes.
Yeah, thanks, Nick, from a precinct. Really enjoyed about the friction and the life map. I guess from those lessons and the other things you've learned from different governments, I was wondering if we could get a bit philosophical and go quite deep. What do you think is the purpose of government?
What I think the purpose of government is? I mean, this is a question I do actually think a lot about. My background's in political science, so I'll give you an academic answer to that. Governance is the process by which we as a group of people make decisions. And governments are the institutions and the processes we set up to support the governance process. So the purpose of government is to support and bring the best out of and enable a community of people to survive and thrive. That's my definition of government. And I think the challenge, of course, is that power messes everything up. I have a debate. There's a good friend of mine, Kevin, and he's the yin to my yang kind of thing. We're opposites in many ways. And I give him that definition, and he's like, Derek, that's beautiful and not in any way grounded in history or fact or reality. He says, government is what's been used by the powerful to control the masses throughout all of history in a way that manages them so they don't revolt. But I like my definition better. Yes.
I was curious about the friction point that you're making, and you said that the question was, where do we want friction? But yeah, just like what do they mean by friction? Is it about the weight? Is it about the choice? Is it why did friction need to be introduced, and in what context?
So when things are frictionless, you don't feel it or experience it. You just slide right on by, right? So the question then becomes, are there times when you don't want to just slide right on by? Are there times when you want to stop, slow down, think, smell the roses, experience things at a deeper level? That's what friction does. Friction forces us to slow down. It forces us to think at a deeper level, to experience at a deeper level, right? So I think the question then becomes, where do we want friction? We want friction in places that we want to think, we want to experience things at a deeper level. So the housing example is an example of that. The way the Singaporean government set that up is the way they set up everything. It was frictionless. So, you got married, and then there's a process, but most of it's done for you. We basically just click, and the next thing you know, you are in a position to have a house. And it just flowed, and it could be something that if you weren't thinking about it, you wouldn't even notice it within your day. And for majority of people, having a house is a big deal. It's something you want to slow down. You want more pomp and ceremony around it. I mean, maybe that's another way. I mean, this is the UK. You guys love pomp and ceremony here. When do you use pomp and ceremony, right? When does that make sense? That's a form of friction, right? You have to slow down. You have to think about things. You have to experience things. I don't know if that answers your question. But yeah, it's like when in life is it important to really slow down and think and experience? Yeah. So there's a question that Jesse has.
Mine's a little bit of a build on that. Is the because you spoke about how it's for powerful people to control the masses. By not having friction so everything slides through, is the friction to stop people being able to control us because it brings in critical thought, questioning stuff. Is there something like that in there as well?
Yes, 100%. So the way I think about Singapore, the metaphor analogy, the thing I have in my head about it is it's like a river, right? And as long as you stay in the middle of the river, you go flying by. And what that means practically is that you have a good life, you have a successful life, you have a good career. So long as you stay in the middle of the river, you fly through. As soon as you start to deviate from the river, you start to experience. Singapore isn't an authoritarian country. But what it does do is that if you start to deviate, you start to experience friction. More and more friction, more and more friction, more and more friction. And you start to fall behind the people who don't experience that friction. And so the frictionlessness is a form of control, social control. I mean, this is the dark side. I'm working on a video. I want to do an Anthony Bourdain style video about Singapore. It's my dream. I've got all this footage. I've even got a script I put together. It's just time and capacity and skill sets. But the title of the film, mini film, 25-minute film, is I want to call it the Singaporean bargain, because the trade-off is you get this frictionless society, but with that frictionlessness becomes much more social obedience. There isn't room. You can resist, you can protest, but you experience that friction fast, and it is jolting to experience that friction come on fast, particularly when you're not used to it. Because again, this experience through your whole entire life, that it's this frictionless experience, and if you just all of a sudden hit the friction, it just shocks you. And I met with people who experienced that friction. They used to have. There's this really weird. Every country has these really cool little things. If you like go down like this, side road and you find these interesting things. And so in the case of Singapore, they had a university they set up in partnership with, I think it was the University of the U.S. It was like Stanford or something. And it ended up being this like place was like a safe space for like alternative thinking. And it ran for about 5 or 6 years until the state got really uncomfortable with it and put on a lot of friction that made it financially no longer viable, and Stanford pulled out. But for those 5 or 6 years, it created this incredible community of space for people to think and do things in ways that are completely different to the street, like the middle of the road or middle of the river path. And I got to meet with some of the people who are in that program, and they're different. The way they think is different, the way they engage. But then they talk about how difficult it is to then enter back into mainstream Singaporean society. Yes.
One last thing, and then I'm going to shut up.
That's fine.
I know. I think I'm flipping it in the other way, that it's positive frictions, because you're sort of talking about friction as a negative, but friction as a positive to make the population think. The thing I don't like about Amazon is before I pay, it doesn't go, are you sure you want this? I love being asked that, because sometimes I'm like, no, I don't need it. And I think it's that, how do we, like, fierce no, like, what if government loved you and loved you enough to give you positive frictions?
Yeah. Thea Snow's great, by the way. Definitely search her stuff. And had a chance to meet with her when I was in Melbourne.
I know.
Yeah, she's also like, I mean, friction is just stuff that forces you to slow down and have to think. And sometimes that's great, sometimes it's bad, right? And that's the thing that Liana talked about, was this idea of intentional friction. Being intentional about where we put friction and where we don't put friction, right? So in Singapore, in fairness, Singapore is intentional about where it puts friction and where it doesn't put friction, but it's top down, right? It's not chosen by the people, it's chosen by a small elite group of people at the top. To reinforce a certain way of society, right? But yeah, friction can do all sorts of really good things because it forces us to think. So Jesse, you had a question?
I guess kind of building up on the same universe of ideas, but I wonder if in your travels you've come across a changing perspective on what it means to be a civic punk and the kind of how that's related to kind of digital government transformation. So if you think about kind of like, for a UK perspective, a 20-year journey of like GDS and all that amazing work that happened at the beginning of that story, thinking of that as a very positively minded, trying to change the system in a very positive way, in the sense of like empowering people. Fast forward 20 years later, our relationship with technology and society is very, very different. And I wonder if there's like a risk, an unintentional risk of all of this practice that came from the best of places kind of being co-opted into something that maybe the people at the very heart of it aren't super comfortable. So I wonder if kind of the idea I'm trying to drive at is whether or not this idea of being civic punk, this idea of trying to change the system, implement digital transformation, all these other things, does there need to be some kind of critical reflection around what does that mean in the modern current? And is it still kind of resistance, or is it now actually the power? Is it now the thing that is? Do you get it?
There's a lot in there, Jesse. No, but it's. I'll take a shot at a couple things on that. It's a good question. And actually, Susanna, it reminds me of some of the conversations you and I had on your podcast. Susanna has a podcast, by the way. So it's on the list, Civil Service World podcast. So what a civic punk is, I think by definition, is constantly changing because of the punk side of it. What I mean, the punk side of it is this rebelliousness against the status quo. So as the status quo changes, what it means to be a punk changes as well. And I think that's healthy. I mean, the other thing I'll say is that it's not like civic punks are all aligned. You can rebel in all sorts of different ways. And it's not always healthy either. You know, it's just now I believe we're at a period where we desperately need a lot of change in our systems, particularly around government. And so civic punks at this point are really important in our ecosystem. But the other thing, which ties into I think what Susanna and I talked about on our podcast, if my memory's right, is this idea of swings in the pendulum, right? That we as a species balance between different paradoxes, and we swing between these paradoxes. And so one that I think a lot about is like individualism versus communalism, centralization versus decentralization is another really good one, where sometimes we are drawn to, and we do this in government all the time, where, okay, it's chaos. It's absolute chaos in government right now. We need to centralize it to just get some order because we need to move fast, right? During a war, you centralize. You centralize quickly because you need to move quickly together across the chaos. But then if you're centralized for too long, it starts to feel really restrictive, and you start to romanticize that time when you were decentralized. It was chaotic. It was also like fun and free and the creativity. And you romanticize that past. And eventually that builds up to critical mass, and it creates pressure to swing the other way. And so then you start decentralizing. You know, you push down power and authority. You give different departments and different levels. Oh, what's the term you use here in the UK? Where you like taking it down to the lower levels, particularly with the local devolve. Thank you, devolve powers, right? That's a move for decentralization, right? And it's coming from a place of a romanticism when it used to be more devolved, and a rebelliousness against that. And so that will then push it. But then, of course, we'll swing too far, and then we'll be too devolved. It'll be chaotic, and we'll come across issues where this is a problem, and we'll start to romanticize. Remember that time when it was all centralized, and yes, we didn't have as much freedom, but God, things worked, and it wasn't chaos? And then we'll start swinging back. But every time we swing, we don't go back to the same place. We take bits and pieces of what we had, and so it's not this, it's like this. Like every time it shifts, right? That's how I kind of think about it. I don't know if that helps. Yeah. So if you think about what GDS was it 12, 14 years ago, whenever it was formed, and what it looks like then versus what is needed now, it's different. The pendulum swung on a couple different issues. Yeah.
On the, you might not have got into this detail, but in Ukraine, the team that were repurposing the app and building that, did you, because I was thinking, well, yeah, to do that, you need a team of people. Mm-hmm. And
I think it was like 7 or 8 of them. It wasn't a big team.
Like, when they come, did they exist already?
Yeah, I mean, so the short answer, the overall answer is I don't know the details to that. They had a small team already in-house, and then once the war started, there's huge support that was coming from the rest of the world, right? So like, and not just countries, like companies, like Microsoft stepped forward. I mean, famously, Elon Musk stepped forward with Starlink, which was a game changer for Ukraine. By giving them access to, like, secure access to internet when their infrastructure is being bombed, because we haven't got the space war yet. So there was a small team at first, and was the core of it that was just there, and they worked, and like people did stuff that wasn't even their day job. Like Victoria, she is the CIO, but she was like coding because that's what was needed in the moment, right? So people pulled skills that they hadn't used in a while just because it's what needed to happen. But then, yeah, then the cavalry came, but that caused all sorts of new challenges, right? Because, I mean, if you want to get super nerdy about this stuff, there's a good book called Recoding America. And one of the chapters talks about this exact dynamic of you have a crisis, you don't have enough people to solve the crisis, a whole bunch of people are brought in to fill that. But then what happens is everything stops because the people who do know how to do stuff have to train. And so everything stops. And so this is a challenge. And I don't know how. I had a friend of mine when I was talking with him over beers a couple nights ago, he asked me the question as well. And I'm like, I don't actually know how they did it. What I realized is I need to go back to Victoria and have 5 or 6 more conversations and then write a book about this or something. It's a good question though. What they did in Kiev is incredible. It's an incredible story, and I feel like I just scratched the surface on it. And there's a lot of layers of complexity. One of the things that I don't understand is that when the digital government space isn't a big space. So if you're working in the digital government space here in the UK, most people know each other, at least at a certain level, particularly at the senior levels. When I was there, I was meeting with people who worked in the government at the national level, and I'm like, oh, I'm going to meet with Victoria, the CIO for Kiev. And they're like, who? Like, yeah, the CIO Kiev. And I'm like, huh? No, I don't know her. I'm like, what? So I'm really curious of that dynamic. It confuses me a lot. How they haven't talked to each other yet. There's a ton of politics. Actually, sorry, I find this really fascinating, how change happens in government. In Ukraine, there's an analogy that I'm thinking about with Ukraine where it's like a star. So with a star, the light that we're experiencing right now is what happened thousands, millions of years ago, right? Because of distance and light and all that kind of stuff. So what we see in the star right now is what happened a long time ago. I think there's somewhat similar dynamic happening right now in Ukraine. So the glow that we're experiencing around Ukraine is what they built in the past. They are going through a really interesting period right now. And it's logical from their perspective to understand why they made the decision, but it's going to have impacts. But what I mean by that is there's a person named, Mikhailo Fedorov. Mikhailo Fedorov is one of the most important people to know if you want to understand digital transformation in Ukraine. He is, the comparison I've used is he's the Francis Maude, for those of you who remember that history. What I mean by that is he's the political leader, the political face, the political champion of digital transformation in Ukraine. He came in and he built the Ministry of Digital Transformation and built that infrastructure. But he's also charismatic. So when I met with these people, they talked about him with awe. They were in awe of him. And he has this charisma to him. And he was born in 1991. I'm like, what are we doing with our lives, Jesse? Not running a country, that's for sure. And honestly, he's probably an heir apparent for prime ministership in the future. He has been so important in building this, bringing people from people came from all over the world. Everybody I met, when the war started, they were out of the country, they were working in the private sector, making 6 figures, and they came back. They took a pay cut, they left a very up and coming career to come back to the country, to be part of the solution to protect the country. It was incredible. I mean, every country would wish to have that type of patriotism. And he became a focal point to bring that group together. The reason I'm saying all this is 6 months ago, he moved from Minister of Digital Transformation to Minister of Defense. Now, makes sense. He's got this, he's really good at what he does, and he brought his whole entire team, or a good chunk of his team, with him. And correlation isn't causation. I don't know. I'm not in the room. Ukraine has been quite successful in the war in the last couple months. I'm suspicious there's probably a connection. The flip side, though, is that the Ministry of Digital Transformation, the ministry that's driving this incredible work, has been gutted, right? They've lost their Minister of Champion, and they've lost a whole bunch of that knowledge base. And now there's a whole new generation, and it's going to take them some time to find themselves and cross their fingers to get a political leader who is able to keep the mantle going. But in the UK example, once Francis Maude left, GDS has been scuffling ever since. So I don't know. Anyways, that was a bit of a tangent. Sorry, Susanna, you're going to ask a question.
Yeah, I was going to ask linked. What's your thinking at the moment around the systems that we need to help Civic Punks thrive, to help them actually make change? Because you're focusing on these amazing people and the Civic Punk vibe. But I'm guessing not everyone in the system can be a punk, otherwise you're not a punk anymore. So what systems do we need that would actually drive change? Let Civic Punks drive change.
So you asked me this question on the podcast as well. Yes, you did. You most definitely did. I'm trying to think what I said. I'm sure what I said that time was brilliant.
How was your thinking evolved after your first leg of your tour?
So the answer I gave then was something along the lines of, one, I think everybody has a little Civic Punk in them. I think we all have that streak in us where we have a bit of rebelliousness, some to more extent, some to less extent. I think that's one of the things I said. I think where my thinking has shifted, because I don't think I talked about it on the podcast, is how important community is. It is the social context that you have. Part of it's leadership, but it's also the social context, the people at your own level and the people you socialize with, that help create the conditions that shape what part of you express, right? So I didn't talk about this earlier when I was talking about Wellington, but right now, Wellington is going through a bit of a dark time as a public servant, as a civic punk. You have leadership that's really repressive towards any type of innovation or outside the box thinking, and a lot of scapegoating of the public service for a lot of mistakes that aren't necessarily their fault and not the conditions then to succeed. That combined with the pandemic has really led to a calcifying of the public service in New Zealand, which is wild because 5 years ago, 7 years ago, it was like really cool. It was one of the places I'm like, Derek, what are you excited about in terms of public service? I'm like, New Zealand, not only do they have the Lord of the Rings and mountains, they have kick-ass public servants who are doing amazing things. Now they have mountains and Lord of the Rings still, but the public servants are struggling more. And it's because that social context, not only is the leadership context become repressive and there isn't space for failure, there isn't space for risk, there isn't space for dialogue. That's so important. Having that space, and both the UK 10 years ago had it too. Like you had this, you got this social fabric that was happening here where you had UK Gov Camp and One Team Gov and the blogging that was happening here. In Canada, we were so jealous to seeing all the blogs that are coming here. People were writing, and that created a space, a context where it became cool and there was space for people to tap into the civic punkness that they had. So I don't know if that answers your question. It's a bit of a rambly answer. Any other questions? Yes.
My question was about kind of meta, and please follow me on this one, but I think a relationship with governments is built over time and what's happened in the past, similar to the START example, and there's a bit of it which is nurturing the future relationship, but when you're constantly reacting, competing, how do you actually slow down to nurture and build a new relationship that isn't purely dependent on what's happened before?
I mean, this is where I think Catherine Day's stuff is really interesting, right? She's part of that is imagining and creating space to see a new way of relating. I think it needs to go all the way back to kids and school. You guys don't have civics here, I don't think, in school. In Canada, we have, at least in Ontario, when I grew up, we had civics, which is a class in high school where you learn about government and how it works, and different structures. So it's partly education, but good civics teachers, which honestly there weren't actually a lot because it wasn't supported as the way it should have been. But good civics teachers would give you a chance to actually go out and get involved in your community. I agree. I agree that we need to have spaces for imagining new relationships. But one of the things I think about with it is when in my early days, I was really involved in democratic activism. And there's a guy who it's so cool. You can tell I'm just a groupie for these people. I fanboy over them. His name's Dave Meslin. He's brilliant. He's the most creative mind I've come across when it comes to civic activism. Just so creative, the ideas he came up with. His point is we were talking about electoral reform. We're talking about how do we change the way Canada votes, because first past the post is a terrible system, because it is. You guys have it here as well. You got to change it. The problem was it's all people knew. It's first past the post. And so you're talking about other systems, you can explain it, but they're I think I get it. Maybe there's a guy named CGP Grey who's a he was a content creator here. He's American, but he was based in the UK, did a bunch of really good videos using animals to explain the different types of electoral systems. But still, it's hard for people to understand because they're not experiencing it. It's just an idea. And so Dave Meslin's genius is stop trying to change the electoral system at the national level. Stop trying to do it at the provincial level. Let's focus on the municipal level. Actually, you know what? Forget that. Let's focus on unions and organizations. Let's go into communities. Because you have a much greater chance of creating change at that level, at that micro level. But two, you start to give people experiences of different ways of voting, right? So to bring that back to your question, I think it's a case of at the local level in people's lives creating new ways of interacting with each other and with the government structures. Because we talk about government as like the UK and England and Wales and Scotland, but government is also like in an organization and in a family and in a religious community or whatever, right? These are all micro versions of governance and government. And maybe it's there that we need to start changing the way we see things. And then I think in some ways that is also the source of the problem, because a lot of those places have broken down. And I think we've lost the muscle. And if we don't have it there, it's much harder for us to know how to use it at these higher, bigger, more complex levels. So I think it's just
You actually escape from the US.
Sort of. I will always keep I'm a Canadian. So as a Canadian, the joke is that you are a mouse riding on top of an elephant. And every twitch the elephant does, you go flying. As a result, most Canadians are fairly tuned into what's happening in the US, more so than their own country. If you are a political scientist, Canadian political scientist, you are incredibly tuned into what's happening in the US. So I'm obsessively following the US, both politically, but also in terms of public sector innovation, right? There's a bunch of people like Jennifer Polka, if you haven't followed her, like she is brilliant. Actually, a lot of the GDS can be traced back to Jennifer Polka. Like she is the godmother of digital transformation, and she's writing some really cool stuff right now. There's interesting stuff. So I'm keeping my finger on the pulse of what's happening through my friends and networks and key thought leaders within the United States, because they are doing some really interesting stuff, particularly at the state and local level. The federal level is a complete mess, but the state and local level, there's some really, really interesting stuff happening there. In terms of going to the United States, my line is, because as a Canadian, we're supposed to boycott it. For those of you who don't know, Canadians are fucking pissed at the United States. And if you talk to any Canadian, the answer you'll get is something along the lines of, we are in an economic war with our big brother, effectively, because US, Canada is big brother, little brother type of relationship. And it's traumatizing what's happening in Canada right now, and people are really upset. And so it's like a buy Canada, boycott US attitude right now. So my position is basically, I'm not going to spend any of my own money. If they were to pay me to go, I would have to sit down with my values and decide what I want to do. Because I do have a ton of friends in the United States, people I admire, people I'm huge fans of. There's a lot of really cool stuff. Like Michael Baskin's one of my favorite people. He's doing innovation stuff in the state of Montgomery. Brian Whitaker with his Humans of the Public Service. Everything he writes, I follow. And we actually do a podcast together, him and I. So I don't know if that answers your question.
I just think, to me, it's like now is the time for problems. In that sense, given the scale of the challenges faced in the United States, it's like this is an opportunity that they're facing an emergency in a different way. Who rises up in response to that? I just think like in New York, particularly.
Yeah.
I'd be interested to see kind of like,
so
particularly from the branding perspective, what Mamdani's doing.
It's not just, Mamdani, obviously, the politician's the face of this. What's his name? There's a guy I'm in contact with.
Max Grinswick.
Pardon?
Figure the state passing now.
Yeah.
Max.
It's not Max, is it?
Henry, sorry.
Thank you. Yeah, Henry. Yeah.
Sorry.
I was like, Henry's right. Yeah. What he's doing is super cool.
Yeah.
He's created a map of states, all the projects that are happening in the US around, and the people who are doing stuff around public sector innovation. He just created a map. And what I didn't realize this until I talked to him, it's not his job. He's doing it in his spare time. This is a side project for him, which is amazing. And this is how, you've met a Civic Punk when their side project is it's not their job. They're just doing it because they're it should happen. That's incredible. The map that they've created. There is some work being done here in the UK that's somewhat similar, Kinship Works. So that's James Plunkett and Gavin Freegard are doing a mapping exercise as well. But yeah, that's an example. That's in New York. And it is going to feed into, because he created that map, it's going to unlock a lot of activity, just connection and collaboration. That is one of the things that is going to accelerate what is the amazing stuff that's happening in New York City and in the state of New York as well. The US they do everything big. They do everything big. They have both the highest of the highs and the lowest of the lows. They have the coolest ideas and the worst ideas. They do everything to turn everything up to 11. So it's impossible not to pay attention to them. It's impossible, and it's worth paying. They also take a lot of oxygen. I'm really excited to go to Africa because no one's talking about Africa, and they should be. I'm really excited to go to South America because same thing. I think the other thing that's important. Is I'm exploring the future of government. There are many futures. I want to go to Argentina, not because it's a future I agree with, but because it is a potential future and one worth looking into, right? So.
Sorry, yeah. So, two questions, exactly. One, where in Africa are you very keen to go to? Because, big continent.
Huge continent.
And then the other thing is on your tour, I was curious to hear if you have some perhaps good examples and maybe some terrible examples of where you've seen AI regulation being rolled out and digital sovereignty, perhaps. Those two things.
That's a lot of questions there.
I know, just because it's like, well, I saw that was great, or I saw that was terrible.
Okay. And I should say, I've discovered it. So I'm doing my first thing I've never done before. I'm doing a YouTube live. Now, just two people, or one person now, one person here. So if you have a question, one person, feel free to throw it in the chat. Oh, they're dropping like flies. No, okay. So the question number one is Africa. I know I'm going to be going to South Africa. So someone here was asking me earlier, like, how do you decide where you go? And there's a couple of key things that impact or help shape where I go. One is having local contacts on the ground. I don't want to go anywhere that I don't have local contacts because you're kind of like flailing around blindly. They're just honestly, it's the highlight of the trip. The highlight of this trip is the people I get to spend, to stay with. That is always the highlight, is these people I get to stay with. But two, they really serve a really good way of helping me navigate into the place. They're the cultural translators. They're the door openers. They're so important. So that's one piece. The second piece is, where is interesting stuff happening? Right? Like, this is about the future of government. Okay, well, what are some really, every country has it, but certain countries are really doing some cool stuff, right? There's a reason I went to Ukraine, even though it's in a state of war. They're doing some really interesting stuff there. There's a reason I went to Singapore. They're doing really interesting stuff there. There's a reason I went to Malaysia. They're doing really interesting stuff on AI. So the second piece is, who's doing interesting stuff, who's experimenting and trying stuff. Third piece is money. Where can I get?
I really mean regulation and sovereignty.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I wasn't getting
it out because that's not necessarily great.
Yeah, no, I hadn't got to that question yet. So this is still Africa. So in terms of where, it's the local contacts, it's the where they're doing cool stuff, and it's where I can get paid to go. Sovereignty is a really interesting one. And it's fascinating because it's playing out differently in different parts of the world. And I'll throw the two of them together. So shameless plug, I did a panel. Every quarter I do something called the Global Government Innovation Panel. And it's basically a chance to get friends together, a friend from each continent. And we get together and we basically talk about what's interesting that's happening in the world in your part, with regards to public sector innovation in your part of the world. And the last episode was all about digital sovereignty, right? Unfortunately, we didn't have everybody there, so we just had Europe, North America, South America, just because of scheduling. But I mean, Europe's doing some really interesting stuff. France has got some interesting stuff they're building around. So is Germany, actually. But it's complex. Netherlands, there's a really interesting story around the Netherlands where they were really leaning into supporting local businesses for their digital infrastructure. And then one of their local businesses got bought out by an American company. And they were like, oh crap, this thing that we thought we had digital sovereignty on now. And so they actually stepped in and blocked it, which is a whole thing as well. It was controversial, and I haven't been paying attention to it, but I'm sure the US has something to say about that. In the case, so what am I trying to say? Digital sovereignty is a complex topic. There's a guy, Canadian, based here in the UK, a guy named David Eves, who's done a lot of thinking and writing on digital sovereignty, digital public infrastructure as well. And we had a discussion in the fall because he's like, in theory, digital sovereignty is really important. He understands it. In practice, it's a bit of an illusion. And his point was, The digital infrastructure that we depend on is run primarily by American companies. Those American companies have had decades of time with the leading experts in the world and billions, if not trillions of dollars to get to there, right? There's no country in the world, aside from US and China, which have already done it, and maybe the European Union, which is trying to do it chaotically, they could replace that. So it's great to talk about digital sovereignty, but are you being realistic? And what is really the thing that you're trying to do, was his point. So I actually put that question to a guy named Roman. So Roman's the new head of AI for Ukraine. And he's really big into AI sovereignty. He actually comes out of a community of people who've been working on AI sovereignty in Ukraine for the last 10 years. And I'm like, hey, so I heard this, what do you think? His point was, one, this is where open source is huge. Because open source allows you to have a shared collective project that you can build. It doesn't deal with some parts, like some parts of digital infrastructure is like data centers. Open source isn't going to help you with that. That's like an actual physical thing. But in terms of the code pieces, but the other one that he mentioned is AI. There are a lot of open source. It's Ben, you probably know this better than me. Llama, is that right? Is that the one that Meta is using as Llama, right? Yeah. So Llama, he's really excited. He's like, that's an open source one that we can use. But the thing he said that's interesting about AI is we are moving from a place where the focus has been on these big generative models that require the internet to train. Where we're moving into is one where onto that base, we're going to start building layers that are more context specific, specifically with AI agents. AI agents, which is the future of where AI is going right now, is things that do tasks. The context you need for that is much sharper. And so actually where he thinks it's actually ultimately going to go is that he thinks that everybody's going to have, probably on their phone, their own sort of context, data context. And that is going to be the thing that, and through that data, they're going to have their own AI agent that uses their own data context to make sense of things and then uses the general AI where it's needed.
But if we, yes, so yes, but that's very expensive, it's not actually.
Well, I mean, to push back a little bit, it's already there.
Yeah.
the data is already on your phone. It's whether you are in a position to utilize it and reference it.
We have to run the model locally, which is a very good idea. Because then you don't have to rely on giving your information away. Great. Right? I'm not even on a false promise, let's face it. It's not training in the data. So it runs locally, but if you're running an agent, that is so intense. That's so heavy. You can't have a whole world running agents. You don't have electricity grids.
I mean, we're going to find out. This is the sort of the hard, what's it, hard rock and unmovable object, whatever that is. These are the forces that are, I mean, you guys are more on the front lines of this than I am, but my understanding is those two forces are really starting to come head to head. But
anyway, let's deal with licensing first.
We'll see. There's a lot of interesting stuff that's going to happen in this space, but the sovereignty piece is going to become a big deal. And I think the sovereignty piece, I mean, it already is.
Helps it, because you actually don't need the whole stack to be sovereign.
Yeah.
If the regulation is in place to help you kind of keep the right information safe.
Yeah, so, yes. So I'll jump into the regulation side of things here. So I guess I think the key thing that this is the idea is that the piece that needs to be sovereign is the piece that's closest to you. I don't know if I fully agree with that. I think oh God, there's so many rabbit holes. Focus, Derek. In Singapore, I came across a term I'd never come across before. In Singapore, there's a term called cognitive sovereignty that they've been talking a lot about. And the concept of cognitive sovereignty is this. So Singapore is really high on AI. They think everybody should be using AI. They're trying to get all of their populace to be using AI regularly. But they do have a concern that they're worried about, and that's cognitive sovereignty. If you are in a situation where AI becomes the medium through which you make sense of the world, which is where we're heading, if that AI, the context, the data that AI is built upon is mainly American data or even just like Western English data, which most of the AI models are, that starts to Westernize your understanding of things, which if you are a country like Singapore, which is really proud of its sovereignty and its identity, is a threat. So that's cognitive sovereignty. So they're trying to figure out how do we get people really excited about AI and using AI, but protect the cognitive sovereignty piece, which effectively is the same thing that Roman and his team are trying to figure out in Ukraine. They started out focusing on language, but they're more interested in the cognitive sovereignty piece. And so he was excited about the idea of, like, his thing was like, we'll use llama and then we'll place on top of it these other things. I'm like, yeah, but you're still using llama. So that's going to impact your data. I mean, her name's Rebecca Mbaya, Mbaya. She's become one of my favorite writers on public sector innovation and digital transformation. She's based out of South Africa, but she's actually from DRC, which is wild. Her story is just a wild story. She talks a lot about this issue as well, because I mean, it's not just it's a huge issue in many countries in Africa, where I mean, it's just like neocolonialism. I think we're past neocolonialism, but post-neocolonialism. Anyways, where there's huge potential and huge value in people using AI systems, but at what cost? What do you lose? What do you give up? And she's really concerned about it. And her point is like, look, context matters. AI is great at data, terrible at context. And if your context is different than the context the AI system's been trained in, you're going to get some form of hallucination, or it's going to pull you towards that. There's going to be a pull towards that, in this case, Western lens. So I think in some ways I'm just kind of rambling at this point, but the point is that the digital sovereignty case is something that people in countries all over the world, particularly outside of the West, are thinking a lot about, and they're trying to find answers to. It's a hard nut to crack, though. Like, David Eves isn't wrong. It is a hard nut to crack. And I mean, yeah, I don't know. And then the regulation piece.
I missed your first 10 minutes. It's terrible. Sorry. Did you go to China?
No.
Because I was wondering, because they actually do regulate AI properly, and I was like curious to hear stories there. In other ways, obviously, it's not wrong.
Yeah.
It's not authoritarian society, so it's not societal in that sense. But I was like, oh, that's interesting, because we can regulate, and that helps with the sovereignty. It's not that tough and that nut to crack. If you regulate it like we regulate medicine, we'll be fine.
So the regulation piece is interesting.
You're trying to. Yeah, the rate is actually trying to.
Yeah, it's true. I mean,
like for them to regulate the Netherlands as
I'm going to defer to more on this one because this is her area more than mine. Okay. Cool. Any other question? I think we're over time now, so I think I've already taken you past a lot of time. So I should probably we're getting that right. We're going to get kicked out soon. I'm getting to go, Derek, go. Okay. So what I think I would propose is this: there's a pub near here that we've gone to in the past. What's it called again? And there's a couple.
I don't know which one you've been to in the past, but there's a couple. There's two. Just if you turn right at the end, there's one called the Burton. That's normally quite small though. The hospital is that way towards Whitechapel. That's usually got quite a lot of space.
Okay. Well, I mean, you're the local, so I recommend. What pub do you think we should re-congregate at for those who want to? Who the pubs in this area, recommendations? Because
There's one over the road we went to last time.
yeah, which one we went to last time?
Nice.
The next head, I don't think we will.
What is it?
I think it's a gentleman's pub.
I must have misremembered the name. Not that one.
Anyways, we will recongregate at a pub.
Culpeper. I'd go to the Culpeper.
Okay, we're going to the Carl Pepper. Sure, sounds good. Honestly, huge thank you. We're almost out of time. Crap. Huge thank you, honestly, to come. I hope you had a good time. It was interesting in some way or another. I have something I need your help with, so hopefully I can get you guys to do it before you leave quickly. You might have noticed this shirt is signed by all sorts of people. This is the Kyiv shirt. So it's got lots of messages of, resistance from Kyiv. I have a shirt for London that I would love people to sign. So maybe I'll say this. If you are not coming to the pub, sign the shirt before you go. If you are coming to the pub, we'll bring the shirt to the pub. You can sign the pub. Okay? Thank you.